Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar where we are exploring the crucial role of civil society actors in digital inclusion across the Nordic and Baltic region. My name is Annika Östman. I'm head of communications here at Nordregio. I've been following the topic a bit over the past few months, so I'm really happy to be here today and to moderate the session. A few practical points about the live stream. It is recorded and we will be sharing it on our event page afterwards. We're also really curious about who you are and what you think. So we'd love to have your comments and reflections. And the best way to do that is to add them to the chat. And I have my colleague Maya with me today to pick those up.
Yes, hi everyone, my name is Maja Brintzon and I work as a researcher at Nordregio. And I've been a part of this digital inclusion project since I started here 1.5 years ago. And I'm very excited to be here for this webinar. As Annika said, I will be moderating the chat and we encourage you to be active in the chat and ask questions throughout the webinar. And I will raise the questions to our speakers.
Great, thank you, Maya. So to kick us off, we'd like to get to know you better, and we're going to launch our first poll. And we'd like to know where you're from and what sector you represent. Now, I'm going to guess because of the topic of today's webinar, civil society might be overrepresented, but let's see if my hunch is correct. I'm seeing here a lot of participation from Sweden, but also from Norway, Finland, Denmark, Iceland, and Lithuania. Glad to have so many of you here with different nationalities. And in the sectors, we're seeing public and civil society actually almost balancing each other out. Oh, public is winning. So actually, my hunch was completely off, but very happy to have you all here today, and actually really exciting that we have such a good division between both of these sectors, as they're both really necessary, I think, in this conversation. In today's webinar, we are launching a collection of story maps, and they share knowledge from 20 interviews that we have had with civil society actors, underscoring their challenges, success factors, and recommendations. And to give us practical examples of this work, we've invited NGO representatives that actually work with a variety of social groups and with different forms of digital exclusion. So with us today, we have Rosa Maria Hirvar, who is Digital Project Manager at the Icelandic Disability Alliance, working with people with disabilities. Welcome, Rosa Maria. We also have Mikael Karlsson Kerstel, General Manager at Swedish Bynätsforum, working with rural communities. We also have Marika Särbo, who is Project Leader at the Danish National Association of Join-in Places, working with socially vulnerable individuals. And last but not least, we have Dovile Dilane, CEO at the Lithuanian Bit and Byte organization, working with youth. Now, in different ways, all of you work on bridging the digital divide, and we're really excited to hear more from you later on in the webinar. But now, to kick us off, we are going to dive into the research and share this comprehensive story map. So I'd like to ask my colleague Sigrid Jessen to join me on the screen, who's going to present it to you. Hey, Sigrid, welcome.
Thank you so much, Annika.
Over to you.
Yes, thank you so much, and good afternoon, everybody. I would also like to thank you all for joining in to this webinar. We have been looking very much forward to it. My name is Sigrid Jessen, and I am a senior research fellow at Nordregio. And then I'm also having the great joy of being the project leader of the research project Digital Inclusion in Action. In this short presentation, hopefully, I will first give a brief introduction to what is digital inclusion in action, but then I would also put specific emphasis on the study we have been doing, where we have been investigating the civil society's role in digital inclusion across the Nordic and Baltic region. So let me see if I can like this. Okay. But before we get started, I would like to just take a step back and just talk a bit about why is it actually that Nordic and Baltic digital inclusion is important. We argue that Nordic and Baltic digital inclusion is important because of a so-called Nordic and Baltic digital paradox. This is where we can observe the Nordic and Baltic countries to be among the most highly digitalized countries in Europe, also the world actually. This is then resulting in increasing parts of the everyday life is requiring digital skills and tools in order to be able to participate. And if you're then not part of the digitalized community, we can see that certain groups will become at risk of digital exclusion. We are actually also arguing that this digital exclusion might be more significant and severe for those individuals outside the digital society in these Nordic and Baltic countries compared to less digitalized countries. So what is it we do in the the Digital Inclusion in Action project? Digital Inclusion in Action is a 3-year research project focusing on the phenomenon of digital inclusion in the context of the Nordic and Baltic countries. We're building on the Ministerial Declaration Digital North 2.0. We are funded by the Ministerial Council of Digitalisation, also called the MR Digital, and we are consisting of 3 project partners, the Nordregio in Stockholm, and then we have our partner, project partner, the consultancy consortium Digital Europe, located in Copenhagen and Brussels, and then now we have our sister organization in Stockholm, the Nordic Welfare Center. This is a big project. The Digital Inclusion Action is quite big actually, and we have multiple different activities ranging from policy reviews to indicator mappings of indicators relevant for the Nordic and Baltic digital inclusion. Some of these projects and activities have already been published, and some will in the near future also be published. One of the major studies that we've been doing is a study focusing on the role of civil society actors in the Nordic and Baltic countries. So, what role is it that we can see that the Nordic and Baltic civil society actors play in the digital inclusion in this region? If we just start with the acknowledgement, which is both acknowledged in literature, but also in society in general, we can see that civil society actors are a core element of the Nordic and Baltic societies, which among other things is evident by a high level of trust, but also a high level of participation in voluntary organization across the Nordic and Baltic region. In earlier this year, we published a policy report where we can also see that civil society actors are increasingly being mentioned as one of the core solutions in different digital inclusion policies across the Nordic and Baltic regions. However, there's still quite a lot we don't know. We don't know what is setting these organizations apart. We don't know what hurdles they face, and we don't know how we can bolster their efforts going forward. So today I have the great joy of launching our new report called Bytes and Rights. It's a joint effort from multiple team members, so I have just the great joy of presenting this on their behalf. In this publication, we give the word back to the civil society actors. Let me see, I think it's lagging a tiny bit. So, okay. It's a highly comprehensive data collection behind this, which is then resulting in what is, for Nordregio, one of the most comprehensive story maps that we ever published. This is a story map that has multiple different features that you can explore in order to then understand the overall landscape and situation of digital inclusion civil society actors in the Nordic and Baltic countries. You can, among other things, explore regional and national patterns in civil society actors. We have, based on survey data that we collected in the spring and in summer 2023, we've been mapping out regional locations of different society actors, and you can explore the regional and country-specific differences in one of these story maps as well. You can also explore 17 different civil society actors working with digital inclusion in the Nordic and Baltic countries. And these are very diverse actors working with very, very complex groups and subgroups. You can dive into some of their good practices and strategies to see what have worked and what have worked less well. You can see how these actors have been tackling different challenges. And you can also see how these civil society actors then would recommend policymakers and society at large what they can do to bolster the civil society actors' efforts regarding digital inclusion. If we then look at like the cross-country and thematic learnings, we can see there are some main approaches. Overall, it's important to acknowledge that these civil society actors are working with user groups that are incredibly specific and complex. This is then also resulting in that the solutions across the different civil society actors are varying quite significantly. Overall, there are 7 different major groups of solutions that these types of aid that these civil society actors are providing. And these are skill development, strategic lobbying, monitoring digital inclusion and exclusion, technological development, creating awareness, providing access to hardware, and monetary help. What is then also a bit important is that while we say that these are 7 different subgroups, there are many, many different subgroups of these types of solutions, which is also something you can dive into in the story map. If we then look at the cross-country and thematic learnings regarding main challenges, we can see that overall that the main challenges for the civil society actors can, roughly speaking, be divided into 3 different types of groups. These are the financial challenges, societal challenges, and political challenges. If we then look at the financial challenges, we can see that this often relates to the infrequent and project-based funding. This means that we can see that a lot of civil society actors are describing that they only have funding for activities and not for the administrative work, resulting in overall struggles with long-term planning, but also an overall lack of resources, time, and personnel. One respondent put it like this: the civil society sector is now carrying a big burden that is actually not our responsibility in the first place, but we do the work regardless. Maybe it's better that civil society actors take some part in them, but then it should be recognized with fair funding and fair collaboration arrangements so we can continue our work. If we then look at the societal challenges, we can see that this is often relating to stigma at societal level, with this narrative, quite strong narrative that the civil society actors are experiencing, that if you're currently not digitalized, then it's actually your own fault. You have yourself to blame for not being digitalized currently, at least is the narrative. There's also the problem with decreasing interest in volunteer work and a lack of recognition of the awareness and lack of recognition and awareness of the complexity of the groups. If we then look at the political challenges, we can see that there are also stigma at the political level regarding information on the groups, which is then resulting both in a lack of strategic focus from a political side, but also a overall lack of prioritization of funding from this political side. Another respondent put it like this: that we need more strategic approaches to digital inclusion, to the digital inclusion discussion from the policy side. I think we have peculiar governments, and that doesn't have anything to do with political color. They can be red, blue, and even purple. They don't want to risk being perceived as favoring any particular group, and therefore believe that they should support everybody. Consequently, those who are best at writing applications tend to secure the funding. If we then take a step back and look at the key takeaways from this study, and again, it's important to acknowledge it's quite comprehensive and there's many different aspects that you can dive into. So I highly recommend you doing that. But if we have to take some key takeaways from this, we can see that there, from the data that we have been collecting, a regional unequal distribution in the civil society actors offering aid. We can also see that from the civil society actors, there is this pattern on what they perceive as being the major needs. And these are as follow. There's a need of more structured and frequent funding following this increasing responsibility. There's, which also includes the boring things, for example, admin and overhead. There's a need for recognition at the policy level of the problem complexity regarding the groups, the problems, but also the solutions. And last but not least, users should be included in the design of the solutions and policies from the beginning. This was what I had prepared for this presentation. I hope you will all take a look at our civil society story map. There's a lot of different nuances that you can dive into and explore different aspects of the different civil society actors. And then I also hope that if you're interested in the topic of digital inclusion in a Nordic and Baltic context, that you will take a look at our DigiHub, where we also both previously have been publishing a previous report, but we will continue doing this in the future as well, where we are publishing future reports as well. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Sigrid. Thank you so much. And I wanted to jump in before we go to the chat and ask you that when I was looking through the story maps and reading them, it struck me that there is actually quite a lot of several common denominators across the region. But it was maybe a little harder to understand what are the big differences. So what would you pinpoint as some of the differences between the Nordic Baltic region or within it?
It's a good question. I think there's a lot of different national variations where we overall can see similarities in the different approaches and solutions that they're taking. There's still some differences. For example, the focus groups that people are aiding in the work. It's also different quite significantly. Some countries are not paying that much attention to gender, for example, and some are not are paying more attention to refugees and etc. So there are some national variations in that sense. But I would also like to say that one of the main surprises maybe in this work has also been that the civil society actors overall are very similar with the different challenges and different approaches across the different countries at least. And that's something that I think it's important to acknowledge, because that also means we can learn it from each other, from good experiences.
Yeah, and you highlighted there quite a few key takeaways. But if you had to pick just one from the report, what would that be?
I think then it would be that some of the things that has been repeated the most in our interviews, and we can also see it in our survey data, that there is an increasing responsibility for these civil society actors, coming both from the informal side, the demand from user groups, but it's also coming from the top-down approach or the top-down level, where policies are increasingly recognizing the civil society actors as being part of this, the solutions towards digital inclusion. However, what they also experience is that there is a lack of that this increasing responsibility is not being matched with corresponding funding and support overall. So I think that is the main takeaway, that if we want the civil society actors to keep doing what they do and have successful practices, we also need to acknowledge and look into how to support them in the best way possible.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And Maya, I'm going to turn to you to see if we have any comments or questions in the chat that we should take now.
Actually, not at the moment, but I have a follow-up question. Looking ahead, what emerging trends or challenges do you anticipate will shape the landscape of digital inclusion in this Nordic and Baltic region?
In terms of civil society actors,
Yeah.
then I think we will see an increasing demand. And then again, this is also speculation. And like luckily, we have the actual experts, the four of our speakers who have participated in the study and who also have their are working with their everyday life. So they will be able to answer this question much more elegantly than I will. But I think there will be an increasing demand for the civil society actors, and I think this is only something that we will see increasing in the future as well.
All right. Thank you, Maya, and thank you, Sigrid. Before we sort of move on to the second part of the webinar and to hear from our presenters, we'd like to hear a little bit more from you. So we're going to launch our second poll here, and we would like you to answer what is the biggest challenge for civil society actors or NGOs in your country or sector. So you have a few choices there, but if the ones that are there, if you're not satisfied with those, you can also develop your own short answer. So what are we seeing? We're seeing a quite equal here on finance and state support being the main challenges. They're kind of going up and down, but they seem to sort of be line to line. Stigmas and norms still also a challenge, but maybe less so. Sigrid, is this sort of what you would expect and what you're seeing in the research?
Yeah, I would say that this corresponds very well with what we all what I also touched upon before. And of course, there are many different nuances that I think we also will see in the responses. But I think to a large extent, these are also intertwined. That we see that the state support and the financial support is often related to each other. And we can also see that stigmas is both at the political level, but also at the societal level. So I think this corresponds very well with what we also see in our data.
Well, thank you all for sharing. It's really interesting to have your inputs, and I encourage you to keep using the chat with your comments and reflections, especially for this next part of the program where we're really excited to have 4 members who feature in the story maps, who are now going to share a little bit more with you firsthand about the accounts of their work, good practices, and challenges. And kicking us off is Rosa Maria. So welcome, Rosa Maria, and we're looking forward to hearing from you. What good practice or learning are you going to share with us today?
I'm going to speak a bit about community building, and thank you for having me. It's so exciting to be here. I work as a digital project manager at the Icelandic Organization for Disability for people with disabilities. I'm sorry, my speech synthesizer is disturbing me. I'm legally blind myself, but I'd like to speak a little bit about community building. I could speak for hours, but I have 5 minutes, so I'm going to try to keep within the timeline, the time frame. So we have a very specific set of challenges in Iceland. Hemingway famously said that no man is an island, but it sure feels like we're an island out here in the North Atlantic sometimes. We are a very small population, as you might know. We have a very small language in an international context. It's a great big language, but it's a small language in international context. And we have the same variety of disabilities and cross-section of disabilities as you have in other countries. So that gives for a very certain set of challenges when we talk about digital accessibility. And thank you so much for the introduction of the study, because you pinpoint some of the main problem areas for us. We find it quite challenging to include people in this digitalization, and for us, the specific issues of our regional isolation give us a degree of complexity that's very difficult to solve. So we would not have the same market solutions here in Iceland as many of you would know if you work with disabilities in your regions. We do not have the Icelandic languages in iOS, so the Apple products are not accessible for people with disabilities. We do not have special aids provided for our market in our languages. So very often we have to build the solutions ourselves. So we have actors on the market that are building their own solutions from civil society actors, and that's one solution. Then we also have to the government has to try to create equality in the digitalisation, which is problematic and stuff. But what we are going to share with you today is the practice that has been able to bridge some of these problems that we've been trying to use for the last couple of years, and that's to try to address the problem in a new way, in trying to create informal platforms for people to discuss, because the problems are so specific and can be and that we don't have mainstream solutions for them, or the marketplace can't solve them. We have had very good experiences in creating rooms or communities where people from all these cross sections of society that are working with digitalization get the opportunity to sit down and talk. So creating platforms where public sector meets private sector and civil society on every level, and just sharing experience. And this has created a great synergy. We've been able to see how tools that apply to increase accessibility for one group of disabled people can actually be transferred to another. So people with ADHD can actually use some of the aids that have been specially built for visually impaired people, just to take an example. But also we've been able to then pinpoint some of the main problems. So in short, even though it's still, we still have, I think we're really at a very critical moment in this digital inclusion process, where we are excluding an exceedingly bigger number of people, and not least people with disabilities. We have been able to create some spaces where people can solve some of the issues by these informal talks. So that's actually been a good experience for us here in Iceland.
Thank you so much, Rosa Maria, and I encourage you all to put your questions in the chat. I'm just going to follow up with one quick thing, Rosa Maria. These informal talks that you mentioned, how is it that you organize them, and who is invited?
So we try to use our network across. We are of course not the only disability organization in Iceland. We have some more organizations, and we have tried to make a platform where we can discuss across the disability civil society, and that's the thing. That's where you really have to use these incredibly boring ideas about networking that we learn about in the private sector, where you just have to figure out, okay, this person is actually working with, you have to get these personal relationships to people. This is actually the person we need to have, and try to make a lot of room for the coffee break. We have some meetings where we were doing certain projects, but we're trying to create this informal place as well. And this is just like good old-fashioned networking that has to be done.
Yes, and I think that sort of what you underline, the informality of it, is really what's been a success factor. So that's really interesting to hear. Well, thank you so much, Rosa Maria. And we're now actually going to move on to Sweden. And I'm now going to turn to Mikael to hear from you. And yeah, what good learning or lesson do you have for us today?
Hello there. Thank you, Annika, and it's really a pleasure to be here, I must say. Thank you for having us at Byanätsforum, a typical Swedish word. You could wonder, what is Byanätsforum? Yes, we are a trade organization for cooperative associations that have built and own and also manage broadband networks, mostly in the rural areas or all around Sweden. And so we provide infrastructure, or our members provide infrastructure to their members. And we call them byanät in Swedish, or village nets, if you'd like to translate it directly into English. Our members are very diverse, and for example, they've connected everything between 40 and over 2,000 households. And some of them started in 2002, while others started just a couple of years ago. But no, that was one click too far. Yes, but what are our success? When we started this movement in the early 2000s, I'd say that the main reason was to get access to a fast internet. And there was a strive, and there is a strive for equal digital infrastructure, especially in the rural areas. And this, we think it's very important, since the lack of internet connectivity will lead to what we discuss here, digital exclusion. And today, still, every 10th of the rural residents lacks broadband, while the average in Sweden is 1.1%. So we still have a lot to do here in Sweden as well. The commercial actors haven't really been interested in building broadband nets. So as we say in rural areas, if no one does it for us, we'll have to do it ourselves. So the community, so in the village, the community gathered and they started planning how to establish this broadband. But what was it that made it such a success as we think it is? Well, I'd say that this local involvement and engagement meant that the majority of the households in the area joined, and that made the cost more reasonable. Also, the feeling of doing this together made many households that weren't really interested in internet or broadband, they got connected anyway, and that made the price go down even more. And now, a couple of years later, they realize that the grandchildren come to visit much more often, since there's great internet in grandpa's house. That's a little bonus. But also the fact that everyone paid the same amount to get connected, I think that was also important. And that means that regardless of the distance to the household, everybody paid the same price to get connected. And I think this kind of solidarity pricing meant a lot. But also, as I said in the beginning, the fact that the net was established much faster than it would have been otherwise was important. I would say that if you compare a village with a byanät or village net to another village where it wasn't possible to engage the locals in such an association, I would say that it could differ 2, 3, 10 years longer to get this broadband connection. And as I said, also still 10% doesn't have it. So as it says in this last dot, our members, of course, are enablers of digital inclusion, I would say. But also a little bonus with having this kind of association is that you could also save a lot of money now when you own these nets by creating collective internet services. And in some cases, you just pay half or even 30% of what it would cost in the pre-market. And in this way, we keep saving money for all our members over many years. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Michael. A great example of how individuals can be really enablers in the digital inclusion. So thank you so much for sharing. And we'll take any questions you have to Michael in the chat, and we'll get to those after we've heard from everyone. And now we're going to move over to Denmark and to Marika, who's going to share some of the success factors a good lesson learning that you have for us. Welcome.
Thank you. I don't think my present. Yeah, thank you. And I'll
there.
Oh, I can't.
Just click in it once, and then you should be able to use the arrows.
No. Oh, yeah, right. Thank you.
There we go. No worries.
Thank you. I'll tell you about our experience from COVID-19 with creating a community at Facebook for social marginalized people. We realized that the digital join-in places also can create changes in social marginalized people's life. Quite short, we have built the digital join-in places like a physical join-in place where there are daily activities, group courses, and opportunity to advise and guidance. We begin every morning saying good morning to each other. I think we can easily agree that it means a lot to be seen and heard. In our good morning contact, we can ask them, what are we going to do today? Did you sleep well? And we follow up things they have told us, such as an appointment at the doctor, how the dog is doing, and also the children. Okay, all right. That was a bit how we structure the digital join-in place. However, I bet you also curious about how many people engage. Currently, we have 840 participants. One important point to make is also that 40% of the participants cannot visit a traditional join-in place due to either physical or psychology challenges. This means that the digital join-in place is actually able to help people that we're not being able to reach out early on. The audience are people who are fighting with loneliness, bad health, and mental diagnosis, people who are dependent on social benefits from the state, and likewise. When we screen on age and gender, we can see almost 70% are female and most are middle-aged. We all know it's difficult to create changes for social marginalized people. Nevertheless, we experience the opposite. How come? That's the million-dollar question. I believe it's because the digital space makes it easier to take a break. They can participate from the comfort of their own home, something that can be very important if you suffer from psychological challenges or physical challenges. Some quick numbers to those of you who like that. Last year, we have completed 12 group courses with a total of 190 participants. 82% have completed the courses and 85% experience progress. The group courses is, for example, better self-confidence, better communication skills, quit smoking, and so on. In the group courses, we see a correlation between high structure, low entrance, and the participants' experience of progression. We almost see the same positive numbers for the teen weeks. So what could be taken away from you? I think one important question to ask ourselves is what extent we can copy the physical world to the digital and how we can give the digital the right permissions. I have listened 6 rules what we employ in the Digital Join-In Center that I think is fundamental for its success. Firstly, it is crucial for this audition to have a feeling of a safe community. So of course the group has to be private. Next, the name of the employers is always visible, so the participant know who they are communicating with. Remember, they often share very personal things and thoughts, so it's only natural that it's nice to know who you are writing these things. In extension, you can always request a private messenger conversation or phone call. All right, I think my time is overdue. Last but not least, I want to highlight that I don't see the digital as a competitor to the physical world. It's rather to supplement to each other. And if you want to organize digital activities, it's important to consider structure, visibility, repetition, and follow-ups, and how you can support a visual element such as picture or artifacts. Thank you.
Thank you, Marika. Yeah, it is super interesting to hear how you're including the socially vulnerable in these digital joinings. Actually, what are the practical aspects that are the most important? So thank you for sharing those. And now we're moving to the Baltic region, and more specifically to Lithuania, to Dovile. And what will you be sharing with us today? Welcome. Let's see, do we have the right slide and speaker? And we can't hear you yet, Dovile.
Can you hear me?
Ah, there you are. Yes.
Yes. Okay. So I'm excited to share actually some insights we have from our journey at Bit and Byte Creative Technology Academy. And yes, firstly, I want to briefly tell you how it all began. So Bit and Byte was founded 10 years ago, and with a simple observation that kids born in the digital age, they naturally become users of technology. Our goal was and still is to transform this natural curiosity into creativity and to turn the kids to the future creators. And we started this by simply inviting kids from 7 to 14 years old to our weekly Saturday classes, where we learn various tech skills. But it's more than just about technological or digital skills. We connect these kids to the technological professionals, to technological companies, and we create a space where the kids can explore, experiment, and see themselves as the part of the technological world from the very early age. As we grew as a company and in our goal, quickly we realized that even the best intentions could unintentionally widen the existing digital gap, especially among those who are already at the risk of exclusion. And what I'm talking about, one of our main goals from the very early start of the company was to include more girls in technology. What we have learned while trying and while doing this, that engaging girls and their parents at the very early age is crucial. At this age, while the girls are still 7, 8, 9 years old, parents, or usually it is the mothers who make the decision about kids after classes activities, are still very open in their mind to let girls or the children to explore various activities. And the girls at this age also are forming key memories of their capabilities. Also, we found out that continuous ongoing classes is the key, not just these one-off events. This approach helps girls build a sense of belonging and confidence in their technological skills from the very young age, at the same time challenging traditional stereotypes. Our main lessons has been actually the importance of creating environments They're all the kids, regardless the gender, the location they are living, or the abilities they have, can discover the possibilities of technology. We offer both online and in-person classes to ensure that children, even living in rural areas, are not left out. And at the moment, we are tailoring our programs and mentors to be more inclusive of children with special needs. Actually, at Bit and Byte, community, I find, is the key success element. Also partnerships, because we work with technological companies that provide not just fundings, but also spaces or some equipments. Mentors who are the ones who are teaching kids are our so-called unsung heroes, and I could talk endlessly about their passion for meaningful Saturdays. We all here at Bit and Byte want kids to be the part of technological industry, to be fully engaged and empowered. And by including everyone, we aim to ensure that technology skills became bridge rather than a barrier, and that every kid has the opportunity to be a creator, not simple consumer. So yes, today I want to thank you all for your time, and I look forward to continuing the important conversation about digital inclusion.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Dovile. Really interesting to hear how you're targeting youth and specifically young girls. I have a 6-year-old myself. She's quite good digitally, but I'm feeling the pressure to step it up now and really engage her on the topic. I'm going to ask all of my speakers to come back so we can take some questions from the chat, and I also have a few for you. So we're going to have a short discussion here before we end today. And it's been really exciting to sort of focus on the positive and the success factors and the lessons learned and how you've succeeded. But of course, you do have challenges. And Sigrid highlighted that our research shows there is more recognition for your work, but especially this political and financial issues still remain, the support on those two issues. So maybe, Mikael, if I go to you first, what do you see as the main challenge in your work?
Well, one of the main challenges for our members is to kind of keep up the good spirit. I see when you've built this net and you've provided it to all the members, it's easy done to get a little laid back and to think that now we're finished with this project, so no, let's go on to the next project. But it's also a big responsibility to keep on providing this to the members. And I also think it was interesting what Sigrid said, that you see an increasing responsibility for NGOs in the public point of view, and I think I could see that as well, but in many other areas. But I will stop there.
Yes, and I found it interesting to read in the story map in the section on your side. Maybe there's this recognition, but in terms of the connectivity and this rural issue, you sort of wrote there's the misconception among policymakers that Sweden's broadband is complete.
Yes,
and
as I
thought
said,
that was really interesting. Yeah,
10% still doesn't have a good internet connection in Sweden, although we think we're finished.
Yes. No, it's interesting how that can be such a misconception. But if we go over to you, Rosa-Maria, in Iceland, what are some of the main challenges you're facing working with people with disabilities?
I think it was pinpointed very well in the study that we have kind of received this. Yeah. So as an organization, our main project is to be a voice for people with disabilities and kind of try to make us visible on every area of society, also digitalization. But we've kind of also gotten the job of solving the issue, which is a new thing, and I don't really understand how this happened. So at the same time as we are kind of we both have to point out the problem and step up with the solution, and I'm not sure that that's fair, or yeah, the best way of doing it, because there are conflicting interests there, right? So that's a challenge, and that just goes to show how stigmatized people with disabilities are and marginalized in at least Icelandic society today, that we have kind of been forgotten in this development.
And I think one of the things I've read was that there is no overall view of the issues or responsibilities. So there's no system for follow-up regarding digital accessibility and standards. And I think that's sort of to the point that you're speaking there, that you're both highlighting the issue, but also supposed to follow up and provide the solutions. And that's a big ask. What if we turn to you, Marika, and in your work, what are you finding as a main challenge now?
Okay, thank you. The digital join-in places are now 4 years old, and we only get 2 years funding, and the next year we don't have any funding for right now. So the big challenge right now is the funding to next year and otherwise, because we know the digital join-in places is very means a lot for the addition who get a new community and relationships.
Yeah, and I thought what was interesting, I read about the sort of that there's a lot of mistrust among this group, and that's a real issue of why they don't engage in the digital space, and that sort of you provide a really important link there in helping build that trust. So yes, short-term financing then is sort of a main challenge. And Dovile, is that similar for you? Is it financing, or is there anything else right now that is top of mind?
I actually agree with Marika about finances, because yes, it's one of the main challenges in all our organizations. Like, just give us the money, we know that the impact we can create with this. But at the same time, I do believe that in our organization, by doing everyday work, everyday meaningful work, we sometimes get covered with all the daily stuffs. And it's very important, just like in these panel discussions, just to step back and to look at a broader view. Like, it's very meaningful what we are doing with everyday work, which sometimes like we get stuck. We have to make very creative solutions with the limits we have. And it's interesting, like that's why we got into this sector, to make the meaning and to make the bigger, better solutions for the world.
Yes, thank you. And I see time is running away here. So I'm going to turn to Maya and to the chat, because I want to make sure we have some time to take questions from you in the audience as well, and not just my questions. Maya, do we have some?
Yes, we actually have quite a few. So we have a question to all of the panelists from Jon. What do you think is the main challenge in legislation work for the digital inclusion work in the coming year? What is your view on this?
So who wants to kick off? Should we go to Iceland? Rosa Maria, is there a particular legislative issue on the table for the future and challenge?
Yes, we are constantly facing legislative issues. Because we're not a part of the European Union, we do receive these directives and the European Accessibility Act through the EES, which is like Norway, Iceland, and Luxembourg. We're always behind, and normal legislation takes enough time to get through the system, but it seems that accessibility, the digital inclusion always end up at the bottom of the pile. So I mean, we've been waiting 4 years for just the first directive on accessibility from the European legislation here in Iceland. So that's just, we're constantly pushing for legislation.
So that's definitely a real challenge then. Anyone else want to speak on this particular issue of legislation?
Well, in my area, we have the Gigabit Act that says that all members, everybody living in the EU should have 1 gigabit in a couple of years, and our government have still not finished the work with providing a strategy for that.
Yeah.
We're still waiting for it. So I think that's the big thing for us at the moment.
Thank you. And Maya, let's turn to one more question in the chat. I think we have time for one more.
Yes. Then it's a question from Eivor. Can a decreasing interest in voluntary work be seen in all countries, or is it just in Sweden that voluntary organizations have a problem to find board members and people to do the work?
Yes, interesting. I'm not sure if you're speaking from your own experience or if that's something that we highlight about Sweden in particular. But Sigrid, do you want to jump in quickly on what you're seeing in the research on that?
Yeah,
As
I
you
can do
mentioned
that.
it.
So I think something that's quite interesting, at least from across the majority of the civil society actors that we are talking with, is that they can see this trend after COVID-19, that they are not up to the same level of volunteers as they were before COVID-19. And I think that's something that at least the majority of the civil society actors are touching upon. So something happened during those years where people are still trying to get as many volunteers as before.
Thank you. And I'm going to give each of our panelists 10 seconds to jump in here with a final word, maybe to highlight what is the key thing for success going forward for you. You've highlighted sort of what's been success factors going up until this point, but what do you need going forward? And who looks excited to start? Marika, I'm going to call on you first. I guess financing, because you only have 1 year ahead, would maybe...
Yeah, right, yeah.
We're back to
It's
it.
the funding, yeah, right. Yeah, it's the big challenge.
Yes, because without it, I guess we may not hear more from you in a year's time.
Yeah, right.
Which would be a big shame. How about you, Rosa Maria? What's, besides legislation we've mentioned, what's another key solution or success factor you need going forward?
Yeah, I'd like to be very creative and talk about informal stuff, but it's financing. So
Okay.
it's always the thing.
And Dovile, do you concur?
Yeah, I do think that for me, it's about not being alone. Like sometimes to find these like-minded people who will support you on the hard days, like when the financing stocks, and like to look at the others. I do hope Rosa Maria said, like to look at the other players in your ground, not as competitors, but as collaborators, because we all are reaching the same goal.
And finally, over to you, Mikael.
Yeah, well, as an infrastructure guy, or what I should call myself, I would say that creating a good resilience in our nets is the main challenge for us. We're getting into harder times, and that's the work of the future for us in many regards. But of course, you need finance to do that.
Yes, but a preparedness for the future and crises, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel we've only touched on all of the topics. We haven't had time to really dive in, but you can do that in the story map. So if you'd like to know more about these organizations and the findings, I really encourage you to explore the publication. Also want to remind you, as Sigrid said, that in this project, we've actually published a number of publications on everything from good governance, monitoring processes, and the definition of digital inclusion. So make sure to check them out, and we'll include them in the chat. And before we close, we always would like to ask for some feedback. So we're going to launch a poll now so we can hear what you thought about today's event. And speaking of events, I'm going to take a moment just to make a plug for an event series we have here at Nordregio this fall on the green transition. It's going to be 4 events running now from October to December. You can join online or in person, and the first is on the 15th of October here in Stockholm. So I hope to see some of you then. We'll include a link in the chat. But up until then, I hope you enjoy the story maps, and thank you so much for joining today. I'm sorry we didn't have time to get to all the questions, but hopefully you can find some of the answers in the story map, and we look forward to hearing from you. Have a wonderful afternoon. Thanks so much.